Okay, who's familiar with light therapy? Just in general, if you're, most people have heard about it. So my experience with it goes back about maybe 20 years. In about 1999, one of my longtime friends and mentors, Roger Estes, who was a Qigong master, he was a inventor of many things in many different fields, and Roger Estes, and working with a medical doctor, Charles T. McGee, he's retired out in, actually in Hayden, he's probably about a 5-minute drive from here. We're starting a company to release pulsed red and infrared light devices for therapeutic purposes using a pulse frequency set known as the Nogier frequency set, which is the most proven pulse frequency set ever for these type of purposes. And it was that year that I was introduced to John Bedini because one of their attorneys got them in touch with somebody who was an electrical engineer in Idaho, and it was John who first kind of looked at the possibility of manufacturing these things for us. We didn't, and worked on different projects and stuff. And so from that time, we were the first ones to release those products intended for people where they had only been used since the 80s only by holistic vets and people kind of behind the scenes. Part of it is because different claims and stuff could be made for animals where they can't be made for people. And so that's why there's this big holistic vet type connection to a lot of the light therapy devices over the years. And so what I'm going to go through is this disclaimer. Let's see, I'm on this slide. So this disclaimer here, presentation is not intended to be a substitute by professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something contained within this presentation. So this is a real disclaimer. This is not like a wink, wink, nod, nod, kind of, this is a real disclaimer. Follow your doctor's advice. If you don't know what you're doing, you can get, you can hurt yourself, not from the red light therapy, but if you neglect to follow proper medical advice, that's on you. That's your responsibility. This is for informational purposes, but there are quite a few things that we can say, and then there's things that may be mentioned, but I'm not making any claims for this. Originally, I was hoping to actually have some light devices available, kind of go into that later, but in any case, heed this warning. This is for informational purposes. And I'm going to kind of take you on a journey of some of the red light stuff that is not going to be in most of the red light presentations out there. And it's kind of because of the lineage of the people that I kind of worked with and kind of where it came from. So this skinny-headed kid up there is with Roger Estes. He was the first and only non-Chinese to be certified as a Qigong master by the Chinese Qigong delegation in Beijing. Tested with everything from X-rays to infratonic sound you can hear emitting from his palms, measurable. He was one of the most influential people in my life. He introduced me to John Bedini. He came into my life at a time when I was going through some different things that I couldn't really explain, and so he helped to kind of just, be there as somebody who had similar experiences. And so some of the topics that we're going to, so I'm definitely dedicating this presentation to Roger. As I said, made one of the biggest influences in my life. I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for him doing what I'm doing. So I'm just going to kind of touch on the history of light therapy, talk about lasers versus LEDs, this specific frequency set for a very specific reason. Chi Energy was the name of the company that they put together, where we were manufacturing and distributing pulsed light devices for therapeutic purposes and a few other modalities, devices and stuff we're selling in conjunction for kind of a whole system that was put together. A little bit about how light therapy works. Life Force Energy Network System, I call it lens. You polish your lens so you can really get that light really coherent and moving through your meridian system, which is not theoretical, it's quantified. That meridian system is in your body, is mapped out in the acupuncture maps. Indisputably, it's there. What's going through it, there's a little bit more question right there. But in any case, it's obviously very connected to light therapy. And then I want to cover a little bit of DIY light therapy. Simple stuff you can do for yourself. Non-pulsed, which has amazing benefits, or pulsed, which is better. And I'll share a very simple circuit that anybody can do to pulse at whatever frequency that they want. And if you already understand what that circuit is, you probably know how to go beyond that. So I'm keeping it super, super simple. And one of the reasons for this presentation is because I saw where we came from, what we were charging 20 years ago, where LEDs have evolved while the price went down and everything. And there's just a lot of, so many companies in light therapy are just taking advantage of people. And you might buy a red light panel for growing lights for maybe 25 bucks or something. Well, something that doesn't even have as many lights, not as powerful, but suddenly it has therapeutic claims associated with it, and suddenly it's like 800 bucks. So it's just complete nonsense. And what my goal is to get this information out so people can either do it themselves and make stuff available that just undercuts all these companies ripping people off, because it's pretty sick and wrong. And then some things that I kind of have planned coming out. So right here we'll go into a little bit of the history of light therapy, which actually goes back to pretty ancient times. It's one of the original therapeutic modalities. This right here is an old picture, probably in the 40s or something like that. Most likely this is UV, maybe treating tuberculosis or something like that, which light has been used to treat tuberculosis for thousands of years. Kind of an interesting old picture. Of course, you need the nurse right there to monitor the guy sitting under the light, because you probably wouldn't be able to just turn a switch off or put it on a timer or something. So in ancient light therapy, it goes all the way back to the City of Light in ancient Greek, where they were using light, and I think different like panes of glass where the light would come through for different purposes. And tuberculosis was probably one of the most common things that they were treating with UV from the sun. Egyptians, Romans, Incans, Assyrians, Germans, Indians combined it with herbal therapy, light therapy. Buddhists, the Chinese, Russians, so all around the world for thousands of years, light therapy has specifically been used for all treating all kinds of so-called ailments, using different color of lights, and different color of lights are supposed to do different things. So it really kind of goes way, way back. What I'm going to do is skip all through this into modern light therapy, and when I mean modern, I'm just kind of talking about the last several hundred years, just light in general. So I don't know that Newton was really necessarily involved in light therapy, but a lot of people are familiar with his prismatic linear light model in the visible spectrum out of all the measurable spectrum, where it's, Roy G. Biv, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, UV, and so forth. And that model may not necessarily be correct, but a lot of people cling to this kind of model. And I'm just kind of bringing this up because this is kind of where some of the science and understanding what light is, how the different colors are created out of white light, and so forth. Newton was really more of an alchemist than somebody who was involved in, mass and motion and all these kind of things. Anybody familiar with Goethe? Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. So he wrote on all kinds of stuff. I mean, a lot of different wide range of subjects, a lot of very lengthy books. One of the most common or popular ones was The Theory of Colors. I have not studied it in depth. It just kind of uses as a general reference book. But in The Theory of Colors, there were different observations that he had that completely went in opposition to Newton's model. And it's actually a more correct model on how light works and how we actually perceive light. So if you look at the Newtonian model, I would say for the most part it's incorrect, and Goethe really kind of has it. So if you look, it's not really a linear model. It kind of works like this. And Goethe is the one who came up with the word magenta to describe this light that was kind of a combination that shows up between blue and red. Okay, so it's not really kind of a linear model. And that magenta light actually has properties therapeutically that are not available in any of the other colors themselves. And I don't think that Goethe mapped it out kind of like how we did today on different things, but I'll kind of go through that. There is one free documentary, well, actually it's a pirated copy on YouTube from Magic Hour Films. The documentary is called Light, Darkness, and Colors. If you're interested in color therapy, if you're maybe an artist, you appreciate colors and the perspective of colors and how they change your mood and, you know, differences between light and dark and how different colors kind of fade in and out, that's a must-watch film. It's about maybe 50, 55 minutes, something like that. Should be able to find a copy online. I communicated with them, Magic Hour Films, to see if I was able to release a higher quality version from the DVD, because the quality on there is not that great. Probably have to watch it a couple times to kind of get it through your head, but when you watch that documentary, you're like, I've never seen color in this way, and you'll never look at color the same way again, and you'll never even consider the Newtonian model to be even close to reality. Edwin Babbitt was another person, kind of like Goethe. He was in the 1800s mostly, I think, Borderland Science Research Foundation. They had quite a few articles and different stuff on Babbitt. One of the things he's known for is his model of the atom, which kind of looks like a heart with this vortex kind of moving through it. It's pretty neat. And he also wrote extensively on a lot of different topics, and he also has a book called Light and Color. And I'm just kind of touching on him and Goethe because they were some of the, I don't know if I'd say maybe possibly pioneers in really branching out and getting into super, super detail beyond anything that you would even want to know about all the different aspects of light and their different properties and so forth. And I think Babbitt's therapy was called chromatotherapy, healing with colored lights, possibly. In conventional science, even though this goes back to the late 1800s, Niels Ryberg Finsen, he actually received a Nobel Prize for using light therapy to cure like lupus or something. Finsen used short wavelength light to treat lupus. He thought that the benefits were due to the ultraviolet light killing the bacteria. Recent studies showed that his lens and filter system did not allow such short wavelengths to pass through, instead leading to the conclusion that the light of approximately 400 nanometers generated reactive oxygen that would kill the bacteria. Finsen also used red light to treat smallpox lesions, and he received the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1903 for this. So this is kind of an interesting reference. You know, they took this very serious back then, but the recent study, you know, the plastic must be filtering the UV, and so they're coming up with this kind of idea, even though we know that, you know, UV can kill bacteria. There's UV water treatment devices, you know, kill cryptosporidium and these different little creatures and stuff. The prize is, in recognition of his contributions to the treatment of diseases, especially lupus with concentrated light radiation, whereby he has opened a new avenue for medical science. So back then you can see this was, you know, taken very, very seriously. And this is just a quick PubMed reference. I'm not going to read through this, but this is their explanation of how they thought his modality actually worked in treating lupus, how Finsen's light cured lupus. Not did it possibly cure it, was it questionable, but how it did cure it. They acknowledged that it was effective for that. How many people know Dinshaw? Not as many people as I would think. So I know Borderlands, they were also publishing a lot of material on Dinshaw. There were some videos of discussing his modality and his device he used to create the different colored lights. His method was called spectrochrometry, and it's a home training course in using all kinds of different colored lights to treat everything you can think of. He had it nailed down to where every single minute little thing had a very specific color that had a beneficial effect to it. Later on, his son Darius Dinshaw, I don't know how pure he kept his father's work, but there is a Dinshaw organization that still continues if you're interested in looking into it. This is a device of his, or a picture of his device, or I think it's just a projector, and I think there's something on the side where you can slide in different color filters to make whatever single color or combination of colors that were shined onto different parts of the body. And he was making claims for all kinds of medical stuff, spiritual ailments, mental problems, and all kinds of stuff. But dinshawhealth.org, and I'm putting that up for a reference. I can't speak for it, but in my opinion, I have not really seen anything that just red and infrared by itself couldn't touch, where he has a whole encyclopedia on every single little color and everything. Just red and infrared by itself covers more things than anything you could possibly imagine. I've witnessed it, it's documented, and I'll show you, just kind of the number of references in PubMed, which is Public Medicine, National Institute of Health, Library of Medicine. You go in there and you type in like light therapy, low-level light therapy, red light, 660 nanometer therapy, and so forth. Thousands and thousands and thousands of published papers. So it's taken very seriously behind the scenes. You're not going to see a commercial by some pharmaceutical company saying, hey, buy this, do this red light deal or whatever. There's a massive amount of research. It'd literally take you beyond the rest of your life to even study a fraction of the published material showing the validity of all of this. I just want to touch on lasers. So there's a lot of different acronyms for laser therapy. All that it really is a glorified laser pointer. That might have a stronger, joules per square centimeter and maybe a little bit higher end components with, maybe a 1% tolerance and a resistor and this and that. But for the most part, it's there's nothing special about medical light compared to, a laser pointer, right? Light is light. But what nanometer wavelength for the color are you really looking for? Do you want it portable, battery powered, whatever, or plug-in? LLLT stands for low-level laser therapy, and as you know, a laser is coherent, columnated light. It's out like a column. It's all organized in one direction, very, very focused like this laser pointer, whereas LEDs are non-coherent and it kind of scatters out. And there's pros and cons to both, but there's more benefits to the LED for a lot of practical reasons. This is just a picture of some, red, blue, and green lasers. Obviously, the cost on laser and LED technology has, the cost has gone way down while the quality and the amount of lumens per watt has gone up over the years. So the technology has increased in quality and the price has really gone down. So this is really something that's kind of attainable for everybody. I think the oldest reference I can find published on using laser is this one in 1967, where they're using laser to stimulate the growth of hair on mice. I don't know if it was nude mice that they got hair to grow on it, or if it was just, because they do breed mice called nude mice for all kinds of different stuff, and so maybe it was normal hairy mouse with alopecia or something, and who knows, but in any case, this goes back to the 60s. It's about 50 years ago. Right here, so low-level light therapy or low-level laser therapy, LLLT, there's like, 5 or 6 different acronyms, low-level photon therapy and whatever. If you just take LLLT, rearrange those letters in however many different ways, plug them into PubMed, somebody who's used that acronym to describe lasers and therapy. This was a couple months ago, and it's 5,856 published paper references come up that you can go in and read the abstracts. And if you look at this picture, in 1999 when I got started, it's showing that there were 12 papers published that year, and if you add them all up before then, in 1999, 20 years ago, there was only maybe 125 published papers on low-level light therapy in PubMed. Today, 5,856, and I guarantee if you typed it on your phone right now in PubMed, LLLT, there's probably almost 6,000. It's crazy. You can just see the numbers of the published stuff just keep going up. So, this is just a picture of laser therapy because the person can't hold that on their hand by themselves. They probably need to pay, $1,000 in referrals and all this to have somebody else do that for them. But in any case, that's, this is an example of laser therapy. And where some of the concepts came from is that long time ago, probably not even that long time ago, is that if you take a scalpel and you cut the body, and you take a laser and you do a laser incision, which one heals faster? The laser always heals faster, okay? So if you have what I think possibly the Russians were the first ones to start using lasers for healing, possibly, is that the question is, well, if a laser incision heals faster than a scalpel incision, if you have a scalpel incision and you use a laser and you put it on a cut, will it heal faster? And the answer was yes. So you can see how everything kind of branched out from that school of thought. Here's one example that I can see a couple people in the audience might benefit from. No. These are real kind of results. Putting red and infrared, laser and LED on the skull, on top of the head, can and absolutely will stimulate hair growth 15 minutes a day, maybe 30 minutes a day over a few months. You will actually see these kind of differences, and you can see that this is only like a month and a week or something right here. I don't know what this particular picture came from, probably promoting their own particular device or whatever, but I've been around this long enough that these are realistic results. I've seen this over the years too many times. And like I said earlier, a lot of the light therapy companies are just ripping people off, and here's an example. Even though we're talking about lasers real quick, these are LEDs. Do you want to pay $29.99? $3,000 flipping dollars for a cap with red LEDs in there, which probably costs them $20 or something to manufacture, you know, by the thousands over in China through Alibaba or something, and 3,800, 600. So you can see that it just gets obscene, right? This is completely vulgar and obscene in every way, shape, and form. Obviously, there's simple, cheap ways that even if I stop the presentation right here, go to Amazon, get $25, dollar red light panel for growing plants, and hang it from a thing over your couch while you're watching football or something. I mean, really, it is that simple. Okay.
How about the red heat lamp?
Well, that's mostly infrared. You don't want to burn yourself. Infrared penetrates deeper because the wavelength is a little bit longer. And I'll go into some of the heat stuff. Red also has benefits. You really want to combine them. Ultimately, red and infrared combination is the best. I wouldn't really use the heat lamps because you don't really need them. You can get low power, high output infrared LEDs and combine those with red. And I'll get into that. So that's just kind of a little touching on some of the laser stuff. And then here kind of goes into the LED stuff. So with LED, light-emitting diode is non-coherent light, which is the opposite of a laser, which has very focused light. This is just a little diagram of an LED, depending on whatever substrate material or whatever the elements are that they use to make the little semiconductor junction in these deals, is that when the current moves through it, it'll emit light in different colors. First it was red. I remember I was like in, 9th grade back in the middle 80s or something, and this one techie kid had a little LED and a battery, and he kept doing this on the seat next to me, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. And it's kind of in the back of my mind, and then there was these little science books with little projects and stuff, and I saw a place I could make my own red laser for, $30. I ordered it. It's basically plastic PVC tube with a little circuit and an LED where you drill a hole in the end of it, and that was my laser. Kind of a complete rip-off. But, so I had interest in this red light business with these LEDs, back in the mid-'80s. I guess, that interest came in handy someday. Danny M. Paris, couldn't find a picture of him, but my friends, Dr. McGee and Roger, they knew Danny Paris from way back. He was an aerospace engineer. And in 1982, he was the first person to ever build a red LED device for healing purposes. And he asked Marvin Kane, who is a world-renowned horse doctor, worked on Kentucky Derby winners, you name it. If there's the master of horse acupuncture, he is the one that really fully developed the system beyond anything that was ever developed in Asia for acupuncture on horses. The man is the horse whisperer. He is the master. And people who know holistic veterinarians and stuff, if you talk about Marvin Kane, he is like, the god of holistic vets. But in 1982, how long ago is that? Quite a while back, 37 years or something like that. And but that's the first use of LED. Was he had it sent to Marvin Kane to test, who got phenomenal results. Danny Paris didn't even really believe in this nonsense stuff, but he saw a good opportunity and thought he could make good money in it, and that's why he did it. But I think later on he became a convert because he saw that it was actually an incredible technology that did work. This is I think the earliest patent, and this is in 1987, where Danny Paris got a patent for a pulsed infrared LED probe, which was used for therapeutic purposes, mostly in the holistic world, using, I believe, the Nogier frequencies. And so he makes a point of saying the non-laser diodes have more to offer in one respect, compared to lasers, is that they have scattered light, which means you get a more even distribution of light over a certain area. And that's something that a lot of the people who are just stuck on the whole, oh, it's got to be a laser and the certain joules per centimeter and all this business, not really true. You can get the same effects with LEDs. It is more evenly distributed. And it's safer. You don't have a chance of blinding yourself in the eye and having the same kind of damage as laser and all that kind of stuff. This is a picture of Marvin Kane. So yeah, he died a couple years ago. I always wanted to meet him, never had the chance, but Dr. McGee and Roger, they knew Marvin Kane for a long time and had developed some devices for him to test out on horses and stuff, which worked phenomenally well. And I just mentioned this again, 82 is when Marvin Kane first had his hands on it. And what the first experience was for Marvin Kane was that a racehorse had a rock, got kicked up off the track, scratched the cornea, and I guess the regular remedy is that they'll just wash it out with saline solution, keep it clean, and in about a week, it'll heal up. So Marvin Kane took Danny Paris's pulsed, red and or infrared light, put it on the racehorse's eye for a couple minutes, pulsing at 292 cycles a second, which is the Nogier frequency for ectoderm tissue, which would be the eye, outside tissue type, which I'll get into the embryology later, is that later on in the exact same day, 2 hours later, he could see the edges of it already closing up in the exact same day, and normally it doesn't heal for a week. So needless to say, Marvin Kane was, shocked at the effectiveness of this and how fast it worked and how simple it was. And ever since then, he probably has more experience than any human being on the planet using red light therapy for treating, and especially using the pulsed LED method using the Nogier frequencies. So just just as a side note, you do want to use square wave, not sine wave, triangle, or anything. You just want the instant on, instant off, as quick instant off as you can get at whatever frequency you're pulsing the red and infrared lights at. So Dr. Paul Nogier, he is known as the father of auriculotherapy. He lived in Lyon, France, and had developed the full ear acupuncture model. So we have a lot of microcosms on our body, right? Like we have our whole body, head, torso, got the legs, the arms, the hands, the whole 9 yards, right? And your whole hand is the head, the body. These are the arms, these are the legs. Every point on the bottom of your foot corresponds to a different part in the body. Every part in the iris, iridology, corresponds to a different part in the body. Every part on the ear corresponds to a different part of the body. You turn the ear and you look at it upside down. It's like a little fetus where this is the head and it curls around, the spine. And so it's a mirror image of the body. The reason pirates would pierce their ears years back was because that corresponds to where the eyes are, and to stimulate your vision center so they could crawl up on that crow's nest and they could look out with sharper vision. They could see a little bit further. That's where some of the stimulating that area came from, was really for your eyes. Let's see. So Nogier's method is really strongly rooted in embryology and how the different tissues form. And so when a sperm fertilizes an egg, this is known as like the 100 cell stage, where all the cells are basically identical. They have not differentiated, so you have 100 identical cells. And then one of the mysteries of life is, well, how does it know what to turn into? Is that information in the morphic field and it's drawing on it? And whatever the answer is, nobody really knows. I tend to believe it is an organized information in consciousness that it feeds on and kind of dictates what it's supposed to go into. What happens is at the 100 cell stage, the sides of it kind of pooches in, and then you can kind of see that it kind of forms these little tubes right here like this. And what happens is that one of the tubes is called the neural tube, and that becomes the spinal column and then the brain. And the other tube is the GI tract, which is the mouth, all the way down to the anus. So as an embryo is developing at this point, you can see that the two priorities is how to get this thing to seek out something to feed the other tube, right? To feed itself. That's the primary deal on how the embryo develops. This kind of a cross-section kind of view, just kind of showing So when you hear mesoderm tissue, that means middle tissue. Endoderm tissue is the inside tissue. And then the ectoderm tissue is all the outside tissue, like skin and stuff. And so in the Nogier frequency system, the ectoderm tissue is 292 times per second. And if you don't know what frequency to use, always use that one, because that's also the universal frequency for the acupuncture points and everything else. And, you know, not just healing cuts and stuff like that, but as an acupuncturist, you can actually use the red light therapy as a, you know, in place of a needle. Yeah, the nervous system, eyes, enamel on the teeth, the skin, the acupuncture system on the outside of the body, because we have channels all through the inside, but you're not going to, you know, stick a needle way deep to access all those. So for practical purposes, the acupuncture modality is, you know, on the surface. But all these tissues come from ectoderm tissue on the outside. And 584 cycles per second is doubling 292, which is for endoderm tissue. Lining of the GI tract, a lot of the different organs. And then we have, you double that, and then you have 1168 cycles per second, which is for mesoderm tissue, which is cartilage, bone, muscles, you know, that kind of thing. One example of the effectiveness of this is that, for example, there was one study that, I remember discussing this with Dr. McGee, where there's an experiment done on a rabbit where I guess the rabbit was knocked out, not permanently yet. He was just put to sleep, not dead sleep, but just literally sleeping. And they cut a tendon that was attached to a bone, and then they reattached it. What they did was they had a spring-loaded scale, so they knew how many pounds of force it would take to rip the tendon off the bone. They reattached it, pulsed it at 1168 cycles per second with red and or infrared. And after it healed up and everything, then they killed the rabbit, and then they put the spring-loaded scale on there to see how many pounds it would take to rip that tendon off the bone, and it was way more. After it had been torn, reattached, and treated with the light at that frequency, it became even stronger than how it was naturally attached. That's pretty profound and simple. That's a pretty serious testimony. So how Nogier derived these frequencies is he would do something called like a radial artery reflex test. You have a pulse right here. Normally, you're taught not to take a pulse with your thumb because you can have a pulse in your thumb and you can kind of confuse it. But if you're using enough common sense and you're sensitive enough, you can distinguish, you know, between what you're actually feeling. And what he would do was, I'll show you a picture in a second, but he called that reflex where when you use a certain frequency corresponding to a certain tissue type, and you had it either by electrical stimulation pulsing at that frequency or light or whatever on a different part of the ear that corresponded to a certain tissue type, you would actually get a strengthening response, which is actually measured on the machine. He called it the reflex auriculocardiac, or the vasoautonomic signal, showing that at those frequencies you actually get a strengthening response in the pulse. Here's a picture of Dr. McGee just demonstrating on Roger, because Dr. McGee actually studied with Nogier back in the 70s, and right 3 months before we started getting into all this and everything, he just threw all his notes away from all that study with Nogier because he thought he would never need it again. And 3 months later, Roger's telling him, you know, kind of what we're getting involved in, and he's like, oh, you know. So so his hand is showing, you know, bringing like a punctoscope. I think this had a little bit of voltage and current that would variable frequency, and you could bring it right up to different points on the ear. And that's a picture of Dr. McGee's device that he had since the 70s on that. And it's kind of interesting because all the frequencies, you know, at first he didn't know what frequency, so how do you find a frequency is using a signal generator and to pulse the electricity or whatever at a different frequency, and wherever he had the strengthening response, he would write all these frequencies down. Turned out they were all like harmonics of the musical D note in whatever music scale or whatever. They're all based on multiples of 73. My speculation, and I'm pretty sure it's a correct one, is that 73 is like advancing the distributor a little bit, and so 72 is half 144, you know, like one of the Fibonacci numbers, and all these natural numbers, rhythms, and cycles is that we're in balance with multiples of 72. So if you advance the distributor a little bit, 1 cycle per second further, and you multiply those, or Nogier is giving the strengthening one. So ideally at 72, you would not get a strengthening a response, that would be a balanced response, but you don't want to retard the distributor to a lower frequency because you don't want to tone somebody down in certain areas because it can be dangerous. You always want to balance or stimulate. You don't want to suppress something. But that's how he found out, and they were tied in with the musical note, harmonics, that he didn't know at first. So Chi Energy is the name of the company. That was the little flagship product, which was a handheld, portable LED device, which could be set at the 3 main frequencies, A, B, and C, but there are other ones for hormone and pain and other stuff. And you could cycle through all 7 or let them cycle automatically and just kind of repeat, or you could just fix it like on the A frequency if it was treating skin or something like that. And up until we released these, it was the Nogier products were really only available in the veterinarian world. And because of the notoriety of Dr. McGee and how high in demand he was usually one of the main speakers at the American Naturopathic Medical Association and some of these other conferences and stuff that I would go to with him. He would present. I'd be running the table, and in 6 months flat, we sold like $600,000 worth of devices, mostly to medical doctors who were treating their patients and selling them to their patients. And this was 20 years ago, about 18 years ago at that time. His background, I'm not going to read all this. I'm just having this in here just for a reference. But he was an officer with the CDC control, or he was an intelligence officer with the CDC. He worked with Project Hope down in Ecuador. He created some type of specialty outpatient clinic. I don't remember what it was in California, still running to this day. Him and McGee, or him and Roger were both good friends with Linus Pauling and Ewan Cameron and these other people. So that's kind of where I kind of got my school of thought coming down through that path. He started one of the largest chelation practices in America, which was right here, I think, in Coeur d'Alene, and then he sold it to a doctor over in Spokane who's still running that right now. These are a couple of his books: How to Survive Modern Technology, Heart Frauds. This is kind of funny because when he originally released it in '93, Uncovering the Biggest Health Scam in History. And then in 2001, he re-released it and kind of downplayed the subtitle as, the misapplication of high technology in heart disease. So if you want to know about the cholesterol scam and the statin scam and all this kind of stuff, that's a must read right there, because if you're, I'm not going to get too much into it, but if you want to know what the truth is to the cardio industry and cholesterol and all that kind of stuff, that's the book to read right there. Miracle Healing in China is based on a lot of his research over in China, and Dr. Effie Chow is a Qigong master who taught the Chow Qigong system, very effective, very simple, one of the most popular ones in America, and she put on the Qigong congresses down in California. And then there's Healing Energies of Heat and Light. There's still a small handful of used copies available on Amazon. That documents the red light stuff that we worked on at Roger's house, the products and the whole modality, which includes multiple things, and I'll just kind of touch on those real quick. It's unlike any other light energy healing book available out there, because it touches on stuff from a perspective that's not just about trying to be a catalog and showing what all the different stuff is. It's all personal experience stuff on what we actually witnessed and were involved in. So Roger, unfortunately he died about, I guess, 11 years ago. When I saw that a few days ago, I couldn't believe it. It's already been 11 years. Absolutely one of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life. He was like a Picasso or something, with drawing and stuff, painting, and he had a real good eye for design and architecture and all that kind of stuff. And he was in the Air Force, maybe it was Army Air Corps back then, I don't know, but probably maybe in the Air Force. And he designed a lot of the officers and NCO clubs, different Air Force bases around the world. He invented the world's largest embroidery press when he was in his 20s down in Mississippi. The wood playpins. He invented the net playpins way back with the net around it. Fail-safe pull pins. If you got a metal pin and a fire extinguisher and your adrenaline's pumping, you want to put out the fire and you squeeze it, you might forgot to take out the pin, you're going to bend it like that. Well, now you can't get the thing out, and it's useless. So he developed some plastic composite thing that you can't accidentally set it off, but if you really tried, it would just cut clean so you could still use it. Licensed it to, I don't know, American Fire Corporation or whatever, and the countertop stuff with all the different patterns and the colors and stuff. He invented the process to do that, licensed it to the Masonite Corporation years ago. So just a lot of stuff. You know, you're wondering what this hemorrhoid probe business is. Surgical retractor, you know, when you got surgery and you got these things that kind of looks like these claws that are holding everything open. He had some advancement in that made it easier for doctors. This is a hemorrhoid probe that he developed, and it's basically a heated probe you insert rectally, and it treats hemorrhoids. What he did was he had, you know, the problem really bad. He was at his sister's house, maybe in Yakima or somewhere here in Washington, heard some ruckus down the street, you know, through the window at his sister's apartment. I guess it was winter, and the hot water radiator was there. He sat down on it to look out to see what was going on, and he's like, wait a second, ooh, feels kind of good. So first thing he did, he went home, he got a 30-06 brass casing, stuck a heating element in it, connected it to a battery and inserted it. When it got too hot, woo, just turned off the battery, wait for it to cool down, hooked that battery back up, woo, disconnected, and it cured him up faster than anything he's ever tried. Sitz baths, all this, you know, topical stuff, you name it. And that was his where his hemorrhoid probe came from. Well, what's interesting is that it does more than just hemorrhoids. That was the only thing it was cleared by the FDA for, limited to 113 degrees with a variable. His was right here. These were manufactured out in Cheney, which is out past the airport, Spokane Airport. After his patent ran out, the Swiss, Chinese, and Russians knocked it off and started selling knockoff copies of his machine. And the kind of person he was is when he found that out, he was like, man, can you imagine how many more people are going to have access to it? So that was kind of his attitude about it. They did a lot of clinicals on hemorrhoids at Sacred Heart here in town. Women, 50% of women have recurring hemorrhoids for the rest of their life after childbirth because of all the pushing. The clinicals done in Japan, I don't know if they used it before giving birth or if the women were using it during giving birth, but one clinical, it was 100% effective in completely preventing hemorrhoids at all. On and on and on. And in China, McGee and Roger got a letter from the Chinese government. They took it to a Chinese restaurant to get it translated in town, and they're like, yeah, you know, the hemorrhoid trial's working out really, really well, but we want you to come to China and talk business. It's knocking out rectal cancer, prostate cancer, bladder cancer, and all this other kind of stuff, localized heat, right? So those are the thinnest veins in the body, right? So all the blood rushes past there, gets warmed up. After 30 minutes to an hour, your core body temperature goes up 1 degree. That's enough to kick in interferon, white blood cell count elevates, and all this. Goes down there to fight against a non-existent burn, right? That's what helps to heal the hemorrhoids really quick. But then those are the venous return veins pumping all this stuff back to the heart, going through the whole body, so you have remote effects on the entire body, anything related to immunity and other stuff. And you know, McGee found that back in the 30s, I think, there was something called the Elliott treatment regulator at Johns Hopkins University, which was some type of rubber bladder that was inserted vaginally into women that had gonorrhea or something like that, and all it was hot water circulating in and circulating out. Elevating that temperature completely cured it. And these papers are still available if you look. So you can see that just plain old heat by itself has very incredible actions on the immune system. And you know, and like I said, he was also a Qigong master. He never knew he had these abilities until one day Dr. McGee was at his house, and Roger waved by to him, and his hands were always like super blood red with these big like white circles in the center of his palms. He could walk up to you and you can go like this. He would do this. You don't even have to be sensitive. You'd hear like a fluttering sound emitting from his palms. To me, I always described it like if there was a helicopter way off in the background and you can kind of hear it coming over the hills, it's like, that's what it sounded like, and it's measurable in about the 14 hertz range, and it's referred to as infratonic sound. And there's a whole modality where they create these devices that try to replicate that sound for healing purposes. He was tested at the High Energy Physics Research Institute in Beijing, and they found that there was, you know, massive amounts of infrared. Everybody has infrared as heat, but he was just like a heater, solar-powered heater. We'd go out, you know, get charged up in the sun, and people would break out in a sweat standing next to him. People were in like Qigong classes. He'd walk around, and they would always want to stand next to him because their pain went away. But he had X-rays, gamma rays, everything emitting from his palm, the full spectrum of the sun, but like in a homeopathic dose. He was literally emitting the same spectrum as what the sun is emitting, plus the sound. He never knew he had a healing ability from it, but when McGee saw that, he had a background in Qigong because he wrote that Qigong book and been over to China, seen a lot of the top masters. You're talking about focusing and emitting qi on like americium-241, which is like in smoke detectors or whatever. And it's very low emission. You can block it with paper and stuff like that. But imagine after treating it with the hands, having the decay rate go down like this, and over X amount of days, it'll stay that way, and then it'll just slowly go back up to normal. So we're talking about real superhuman abilities that are documented. The Chinese government and other governments are very interested and openly involved in exploring these kind of things, whereas our government is also very, very interested, and they want to do everything possible so you don't even believe any of it is real. Well, what happened about 35 to 40 years ago or something like that was in the basement of St. John's Cathedral on Good Friday, Roger had stigmata, the bleeding of the palms. And he never associated it with healing abilities. This is very, very documented right here in Spokane. It's the only Gothic cathedral in the area. And he always referred to it as the anguish, his anguish, but because of his experience with it. And he never really talked about it too much, but it happened occasionally, little bit, all the way until until he died. But I asked him one time. I said, "Do you think that just your the intense emotional intention and everything and expectation is enough to trigger it, even if it is not spiritually connected or something like that?" And he was open. He says, "Yeah, of course it's possible that he could have so much intention to cause that." So who knows? It happened. What all the connections are, I don't know, but he was one of the most generous people. He was always helping people and never asked for a penny in return, using a lot of these modalities and his own abilities to treat people at his house, never asked for anything in return. And he always mentioned, and I'm just throwing this in because it's kind of an interesting thing for me, that he always mentioned this person named Glee Melcher, but I always heard Glee Milcher is how he pronounced it. And I started looking online because he was somebody in Spokane that was one of his mentors, and I wanted to research him. I'm thinking, who is this Glee Milcher business? Because I couldn't find anything online for Glee Milcher. And then it wasn't until Roger died, and I went to his memorial, and his son, Jeff, who has a company, just happens to be 1 minute across from John Bedini's company, all these parallel kind of things that I just noticed. But he mentioned, yeah, Roger's mentor, Glee Melcher, and Jeff Moe was sitting next to me, and he said, did he say Melcher? Glee Melcher? I was like, yeah, why? One of our best friends was Jared Melcher. Never made a connection. It wasn't until Roger died that I found out it was one of our best friends' grandfathers who was Roger's mentor. And Glee Melcher is the one who invented these sprinkler systems and changed the face of the planet. And he would tell Roger that, yeah, when he was getting old and stuff, yeah, let's go take one last drive. I want to go out and see my tombstones. He just wanted to go out on the highway and look everywhere. Before they were pulled like on a tractor and stuff. These days they're more automatic, these pivot systems. Got a grant from WSU down in Pullman to basically develop this. But yeah, his mentor is the one who changed the face of agriculture by coming up with this. Kind of cool. In the whole Chi Energy process, Linda Hull, she was here last year, medical doctor from Princeton, known as the first barefoot doctor from Princeton, conventionally trained medical doctor, but totally went the holistic route. And I worked for her after I met Roger. He brought me to some Qigong classes she was teaching. So I did office work, scheduled appointments. I organized Qigong classes and different presenters who would come to town, do different weekend workshops and that kind of stuff. She was here last year. I haven't seen her for a long, quite a while. And so she came and she was doing Qigong classes right out here. Some of the people in this picture right here are sitting in this audience who are getting up earlier than I wanted to be here, having fun doing this. But it was in 1999, November, when we went to the World Qigong Congress in San Francisco. That's where I met Dr. Effie Chow. Linda was a good friend of hers. And we met Joy Tang, who was, she was the head of government strategic alliances for Cisco Systems. If you want to talk about somebody who has connections, man, I tell you what, she knew everybody everywhere. Heads of state, presidents of different countries. I mean, she was so well connected. Walked away from all of it so she could start the AIDS Research Foundation and One Village Foundation to teach different village, people in different villages over in Africa, Niger, and so forth, how to become self-sustainable. You know, not the socialist model of just giving them what they need, but putting them in a position to be able to produce goods and do different things. So she could just walk away, and they just keep cranking it out. They don't need to depend on anybody. Self-reliance is basically what it was about. She's over there in Niger right now, making waves. Everything she touches turns to gold. And at the same time, Doctor Who, our own doctor. He was an ordained monk from China. I don't even know if he was in the country legally. He was kind of one of these interesting characters who was the first Qigong master besides Roger that was interested in devices, because a lot of the Qigong masters that we knew were kind of egotistical, where they were just Puritan. Oh, I don't need the devices, I can do it myself. Well, what are you going to do? Clone yourself, and everybody has their personal Qigong master they pull out of a closet every time they want to do something. So, you know, obviously for practical reasons, devices are important. You know, put them in people's hands where they can do things for themselves. And who was very interesting. He was very, very psychic. He was also very childlike. He would just break down and cry in a tantrum and stuff if things didn't kind of go his way. Very interesting person. I think he pretty much grew up in a monastery since he was a little kid, never had parents or anything, but very, very psychic. He could look at somebody, he could draw a picture and put marks in every single part of the body you ever had, like an injury or whatever. And I was doing that with him, and down in California and stuff, became pretty proficient at it. I've always had some abilities, but just kind of being in the presence of people who are, you know, really far advanced in that, you kind of get, it kind of rubs off in a way to where in the moment, in those times, a lot of profound things happen, and I saw a lot of experiences, or had a lot of experiences that I know a lot of people wouldn't believe. This is just a picture of Roger Joy, and myself at his house. And he came up and was really helping to give his feedback on how he thought the light stuff would go. He could turn it, you know, he could close his eyes and stuff. We could do different color LEDs and all this, and he could always tell you exactly what we're doing behind his back. No phony stuff. I mean, the man was very, very gifted. This is McGee screwing around with light over Roger's head. This is Yvonne Wong Rivers. She was part of the team, always going over there. She was one of the ones that I was always standing by Roger at the Qigong classes, because her leg pain went away when she was standing next to him. She was here last year's conference, couldn't make it to this one because she moved down to Texas to be closer to her son. Maybe she'll be back next year. But yeah, she was a tax attorney, she was a biotech, she was the grant writer and coordinator for Eastern Washington University Cancer Research and Prevention Center over in the new campus downtown Spokane. Roger is always joking about how she was the most overqualified person in Spokane. And but incredible person. We really had a dynamic group of people here. And then this is Dave Malone in the background. I think he was a retired electrical engineer from the Marines, and he's the one that was manufacturing these devices for us. And we had, and on here, kind of hard to see, but we did the combination of lights that just happens to always come back to this magenta color, where there was red and infrared, but there was also some that were specifically, Roger always called it fuchsia. It's basically magenta. They didn't know anything about this, but there's something to it that the effectiveness of everything seemed to be a lot easier with a lot less power. I don't know what's all involved with that, you know, unless I craft some type of woo-woo explanation to feed you right now, but which I'm not going to do. But I would definitely suggest experimenting with it. This is one Christmas at Roger's house. There's a tree with red lights on it. Here's a Christmas tree with blue lights on it. And here's one in the background with the red and blue combined. Everything at Roger's house was always fun. And every time you walked in the door, you're wondering, what the hell is going on now? There was always a method to the madness, and every single thing always had a very specific intended purpose to it. There was meaning to everything that he did. You'd walk in, somebody be sitting on the table, he's sitting there smoking a cigarette, and you know, he'd point something out, you're looking at it, well, what about it? He's like, you know, he'd just get you to kind of figure out what the meaning to what it was, you know, just to kind of have fun. But, you know, he was really an interesting person. These were two devices we had, the red carpet, which is red and infrared combo. Then these were, this is what Who came up with. called it the energy balancer. There's only a few LEDs, infrared, scattered amongst the red. And the reason is because if you have 1,000 red LEDs and you have like 5 infrared, you can make all the claims associated with infrared heat. So under the FDA, there was something called GRAS, G-R-A-S, generally recognized as safe. And if something had GRAS status, you could make those claims without applying for the thing that's called a 510K process, where you try to get approval for certain claims for certain devices. Well, infrared has proven over the years to be so safe for like relaxing tight muscles, relieving pain, improving circulation, improving mobility in joints, and there was like one more. And as long as you had infrared, this is infrared, these are low power, not going to put out a whole heck of a lot of heat, but the point is if you have infrared, you can make those claims and associate them with your product without asking for FDA permission. This was a Swiss unit, and Roger actually liked it better than his own. So this is the unit that we started offering as a part of a whole package. The other package besides lights, besides this unit, which cranked up the immune system, but it also kind of balanced the system because you got a governing and conception vessel going up the front and back of your body. Besides the acupuncture meridians all over, you have these 2 main vessels, and that's running right up to the thymus and all this. And so there's a general balancing effect as well by using this type of device. So it goes beyond just hemorrhoids. That's just, one thing. I know how many men I talk to at She Energy where, maybe a little bit up in age, waking up all hours of the night because of BPH or prostatitis. Prostate's inflamed, so it pinches off the urethra, so you can't properly, fully empty the bladder. And so then what happens? You're waking up all night, not getting good quality sleep. I don't know how many people, 30 minutes to an hour one night, that night it actually shrank the prostate enough where they can get a full night of sleep because they could empty their bladder completely on that first night. Over and over. I mean, I can't tell you the things that I've heard from people who are using this for all kinds of stuff. And working at She Energy, I probably talked to more human beings on the planet about inserting a heated probe rectally than any other human being alive. The conversations I had on the phone with people, it just got to the point, it was just, deadpan face because it was, it was routine. But now I kind of, I laughed at it then, but, not on the phone. Had to be serious. But infrared sauna, absolute huge part of the process. This is a sauna I had for about 20 years. These probably maybe $1,500 or so. There's cheaper versions of it. Every single home should have infrared sauna, not a hot steam sauna. You can sweat a lot more at a way lower temperature, 140 degrees or so. You can sweat more than a hot steam sauna at a couple hundred degrees. Hot steam sauna, there's all these associated things, oh, you're detoxifying and all this. Actually, in a hot steam sauna, you don't detoxify a whole lot. You sweat a lot because your electrolytes are dissipating the heat. That's your body radiator system because you're getting cooked from the outside in. So a lot of toxins don't really make it out. You're just sweating a lot. Infrared sauna is warming you from the inside out, and these saunas can penetrate 1.5 inches, 2 inches deep inside of you, releasing toxins, and so you're getting warm from the inside out. It could be the middle of winter, below freezing, you're sitting in your car, the temperature is so cold you need to have a coat on, but if the sun is shining and you just put your hand in that sunshine, don't you instantly feel the heat? Right? And that's all the infrared is. It's freezing cold, absolute zero almost in outer space between the earth and the sun, but as soon as the sun hits something it can actually touch, the heat is generated here, so technically we're not really getting warmed by the sun, we're getting the infrared, but all the heat is created here. And that's what the infrared sauna are, very low power. There's quartz type heating elements in here. Can't really see it, that's just a reflection of my freeze dryer thing here, but right here is a boards with the heating elements behind it. I think there's 1 or 2 on the back, like 1 on the bottom, maybe on a side or something, and it's got like a little timer. And so 30 minutes, 45 minutes, about 45 minutes is a good session. I don't get in there as much as I should or want to. That Quench book right there, I have that. I learned about that in Dr. Gerald Pollack's talk last year. I'll just touch 2 seconds on that in a minute. If you want to look into the benefits of infrared therapy to see really a lot of it, I would recommend searching for the name Dr. Aaron M. Flickstein. And there's some reports you can download for free where he goes into a lot of it. You get a good cardiovascular workout without moving a muscle. That's why NASA recommended that astronauts in space actually use infrared saunas. It just, the list is super, super long on what infrared will do for you. Especially that deep penetrating heat, not just infrared, LEDs for other purposes. You know, this is just one report, 400, 600 calories. Some have shown up to 1,200 calories in an hour just by sitting in infrared sauna. You obviously want to be hydrated with, you know, electrolytes. And then, so we got the lights, we got the probe, we got the infrared heater, and then there was the Greek formula by Dr. Hariton Alivizatos, a genius doctor that Roger knew. I'm not going to go over the Greek formula right now. That was part of some of the stuff that I left out. If there's time, maybe on Sunday, or if anybody is even interested on what that is about, I'll cover that. But this was a whole package that a lot of people with different types of cancer. The cancer was going away. Julius, he was a superintendent of school districts out in Spokane Valley. It was 20 years ago. He had 17 tumors on his liver bulging out. You could actually see him right through the skin. And he was doing a little bit of chemo, a little bit of radiation. Well, he'd come over to Roger's house, and after doing all this, and McGee got all the before and after CAT scans and tracked it for months, everything completely disappeared, normalized, and there was no signs of cancer in his body. Doctor said, you know, well, continue to do the maintenance, chemo and radiation, that kind of stuff. And it killed him, but he died cancer-free. I don't know how many times I've seen that. This cured AIDS. There was another company called Light Energy over in Seattle. Dave and Pam had this company. They had red light therapy devices, and one particular man had T-cell count was almost nothing. He was wasting away. And after a period of applying all this, over about 6 months, he was gaining weight. T-cell count was normal. No signs of any of it. Never came back. And his partner was complaining that he was getting too fat. Literally, I mean, almost anything that I've ever heard of, I've seen results for this. It's no joke. But anyway, that's the book that documents the whole journey. McGee left a lot of stuff out, but it's sufficient to kind of paint the picture, and it's pretty profound. What always ticks me off is when people come along and take credit for other people's stuff, and NASA is notorious for getting somebody within their own system to develop something that's already out there so they can take credit from it. I don't want to, badmouth Dr. Whalen. He did some good work. I think he's from the University of Michigan, something like that. Developed these tiny little pinheads so you could just cluster a lot of them real tight on a panel to get the density of the light up. And for that, he gets inducted into the Space Technology Hall of Fame for coming out with this technology that someday may be used on Earth to help people. You freaking kidding me? Come on, NASA, that was in National Geographic 2001. Okay, well, 1982, Marvin Kane was doing the same thing. So it's just ridiculous what the establishment is out there trying to, take over. So now we're going to get into, let's see how much time we have left, about 30 minutes. Got 50 slides, I think we're in a minute or two. Okay. So I'll go over some of the benefits of light therapy and how it works. This is a picture of a mitochondria right there. I just want to make sure everybody does know about PubMed. So if you go into PubMed, National Institute of Health Library of Medicine, you can type in stuff there like red light, whatever you want to search on any kind of modality, and you can see a lot of published papers in there on all kinds of stuff. There'll be a handful that will say there's not much benefit, but for light therapy, mass majority of them are all very favorable, where it's pretty much indisputable that the modality is incredible beyond belief. So the mitochondria, the little so-called powerhouses of the cell, they live in symbiosis with us. They're in all of our cells. They're the only things in our body that have their own DNA, called mitochondrial DNA, and it's not known as naked DNA because it's kind of out in the open, so it's very susceptible to oxidative damage in the body. And so at about 40 years old, the mitochondrial counts start going down, and as the mitochondrial counts start going down, less ATP production, less redox signaling molecule production, which activate antioxidants, and some of them kill pathogens. Some of them are the signaling messengers to tell the immune system where to go and what to do. And so that's why as we age after about 40, the mitochondria goes down, so healing gets slower and slower and slower. And so it's all pretty much proportional to the quantity and the health of the mitochondria. This is just showing that the size is about 500 to 10,000 nanometers, so we're looking at about that bluish green all the way past here. But if what we, that might be going a little bit too far, but right here in the 660 to say about 900 or 924 so nanometer ranges will cover the most, and so every mitochondria is photosensitive to red light. So if you have red light and it hits the body, the mitochondria kind of wakes up, ATP production starts increasing, all the healing response things start to normalize and everything else. The mitochondria is mostly known for producing ATP in this whole complicated thing called the Krebs cycle. I only knew one human being on the planet, John Kitkowski, who was a Tesla biochemistry, who lived in Spokane, and he was probably the only one that knew the entire, every 100% pathway like the back of his hand. I don't think there's a human being alive who's ever memorized that much. ATP is, you know, you hear about this main energy molecule in the body. So we got adenine over here, which is, I don't know if that's cut off. Oh, yeah, no, you can see the whole thing. So this adenine is basically, or adenosine is an adenine and ribose. Ribose is this pentose sugar molecule right here. Ribose is in ribonucleic acid, or if it's missing one of the oxygens down here, it's going to be a deoxygenated ribonucleic acid. So that's the basis of RNA and DNA. Sugar tastes really good. It's a little sweet taste to it. There's a whole field of glucobiology and all the good sugars and a lot of stuff that it does, repairing myelin sheaths, you know, galactose and all these kind of things. Well, anytime you have any kind of energy going on, moving a muscle, whatever, one of these phosphate molecules are burned off. So adenosine triphosphate, because 3 phosphates. So when a phosphate so-called gets burned off, that bond is broke. That's where the so-called energy is coming from. And so anybody familiar with creatine? So in sports, let's say you're bench pressing a certain weight and you can do it maybe 10 times. If you just take and load up on creatine for a bit, you might be able to do 11, maybe 12 repetitions with the exact same muscles. All creatine is a phosphate donor floating around in there that can reattach and turn adenosine diphosphate back into adenosine triphosphate, and that's where the extra boost is coming from. So that's the motor, this is the fuel, but you can also supplement with ribose and creatine and get even extra benefit. Right here is basically the same thing, except in this whole respiratory chain business is that the mitochondria, there's all these enzymatic processes. That's really kind of a complicated kind of deal that happens, but the last so-called enzyme is called cytochrome C oxidase, which in conventional literature, they're just making a big deal that, oh, this is what's photosensitive right here is this enzyme, the cytochrome C oxidase, which is photosensitive to like red and infrared, and this is kicking up ATP and stuff. And but that's not the case. It is photosensitive. The mitochondria is also directly photosensitive, as is other things in our body. And when this happens, you're also getting not only ATP, but you're getting increased nitric oxide, carbon dioxide, this whole vasodilation process. So if anybody has an interest in increasing the flow to certain tissues in their body, this is something that can help. Viagra, you know? So Viagra is actually not doing anything directly to stimulate the flow of circulation into these type of soft tissues. What it is we have nitric oxide in our body, then we have a PDE5 enzyme that goes in, and you can say it kind of gobbles up or decomposes nitric oxide to kind of keep it in check, otherwise you'd have it too much. But Viagra can do it in a kind of a dangerous way, so there's like something called horny goat weed. You'd have to eat a whole bushel of this stuff to get any effect, but there's an ingredient in there called ikarin, which is a safe PDE5 inhibitor. So this is not just for like sexual purposes and stuff. If you want like increased circulation, endurance, all this kind of stuff, that PDE5 from that natural ikarin extract from the horny goat weed, epimedium, will actually also act as an inhibitor. And so what happens is it actually allows the nitric oxide to last longer in the body, so the vasodilation process can be prolonged and extended because it's stopping the PDE5 enzyme from breaking this down. And furthermore, grapefruit juice all by itself, there's different medications you can't mix grapefruit juice with because grapefruit juice inactivates the enzymes that break it down, which means it's going to be a lot more potent in your system for a lot longer time. So if you can't take grapefruit juice, don't do it. But if you can, grapefruit juice also helps to partially inhibit the PDE5 process, so it's synergistic with all these other things, which means you can have nitric oxide last longer in your body. So every man should be drinking grapefruit juice on a daily basis as a regular part of the regimen if it doesn't interfere with medication. And red light enhances the whole process. This is just something right here real quick in PubMed, just mentioning that, acknowledging the ATP upregulation from red light and pulsed. So not only are they acknowledging the red light, but that pulsed works better than steady light, and that the conclusion is that CCO, which is a cytochrome C oxidase, is not the primary acceptor for red or near infrared light. Easy water. Who's familiar with that term? So if you're not, Dr. Gerald Pollack is, I think, in the biotech department at UW, University of Washington, over in Seattle, and he's done a massive amount of work in water research, one of the world's leading authorities, I suppose, in structured water and so forth. And last year he gave a talk on easy water, which is a very interesting form of water that forms when you have a hydrophilic or a hydrophobic membrane, that all this negatively charged water moves towards it, and it excludes all these particles in there, so you can actually have a visual, something that you can see, that it separates the water into two different types, and that is called the exclusion zone because it excludes all those particles out of there. And that water apparently is in the same structure and form as the water in our cells, in fruits and stuff like that. And so when you hear about structured water, it's probably the most quantified, proven, actual structured water out there. And it's trippy. In his presentation, have you ever seen solid water at room temperature? Okay, just comprehend the implications of what does that even mean. He showed it looked like a little solidified little cloud kind of thing sitting inside of a jar that somebody did based on some of his research. I'm talking trippy stuff. We're going into the, where man has never gone before. But here's red and infrared. He proved that infrared actually grows that exclusion zone. And on mice that were killed, I guess, they had some little meter that could measure the amount of blood flow. And, you would think when the heart stops, the blood would stop. And when they shine infrared on it, the blood continued to pump even though the heart wasn't even moving.
So how important is sunlight?
Very important.
Very important.
Yeah, very important.
A lot more over in Spokane than we get in
Yeah, right. I like to bake out in the sun. I never use sunscreen. Pollack, if you search his name in PubMed, 156 papers and quite a few. You can just read the abstracts if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And a lot of them are related to water, the cellular water, and all that kind of stuff. He did mention last year a book called Quench by this Dr. Cohen in New York, who took a lot of his research and published this book showing the proper ways to hydrate the body. So if you hear you need to drink 6 to 8 glasses of water a day and all that, well, that actually doesn't hydrate you, and that's not the way people kind of evolved hydrating themselves. Most of it, there's a lot of cultures living out in the desert and that kind of thing. They might drink a glass of water in the morning, and then throughout the rest of the day, they don't really hardly have any water, but they stay fully hydrated because they're getting it all through their foods. And she shows some simple exercises to kind of keep the brain and the head hydrated. Would just show, everybody's kind of landlocked on their little computer desks anymore, and so you can stay hydrated doing the proper things without even drinking really that much water. So this is kind of a revolutionary book right here that I would definitely recommend everybody get, because it'll dispel all the myths you ever heard about hydration. And when I mentioned about the mouse blood keeps pumping while, even though the mouse is dead, Rudolf Steiner is probably one of the most well-known to say that the heart is not a pump, because if it was, the heart would explode, pushing all the blood through all the veins and capillaries and everything, and the blood cells moving through these capillaries are 2 to 3 times bigger than the diameter of the capillaries. So how can you even, what's the deal that makes that happen? And so essentially the heart has, it seems like the heart is only setting up an electrical action for the easy water surrounding the inner peripheral of the veins and arteries and stuff like that, is what's really kind of pulling the blood along, kind of like at a negative resistance, is kind of what it seems like. This is a video I'm going to skip right now. It was about a 7-minute excerpt from Dr. Pollack's talk last year here on his stage that kind of goes into that. Just for time, if there's time, I'll come back to it if somebody reminds me. But it basically shows this exclusion zone process and the studies that were done to show that the blood can still keep pumping if there's infrared, which was increasing the easy water, which gets the blood to flow. And so that's the importance of the infrared sauna. This corny looking contraption here is a cheap infrared sauna, We used to sell these for maybe, I don't know, 600, 700 bucks or something like that 18 years ago. Some of them have steam inside and some of them have infrared. They both look the same. You can find these on Amazon, I think, for about under 200 bucks. So if you don't want to spend, you know, mine is maybe like a 2-person adult sauna. This might have been around in the $1,500 range or something like that. You get a 1-person one, maybe 800 bucks or something. But you can get these all day long on Amazon for, I think, 150 to 200 bucks or something. You sit in a little chair in there, you zip it up and pop your head out, and you got an infrared sauna for cheap, and you're getting all those benefits of the infrared.
And it pulls up super small, so you can put it in the wall.
Pulls out what?
It pulls up super small, so you can.
Oh, so it takes up a little bit of space when it's collapsed? Yeah.
We used to have one of those, but we'd sit inside of it because we wanted our head to be
Okay.
inside. That's kind of,
Okay.
but they're great.
I can't recommend doing that, but your whole head is inside this. You know, and it's kind of gradual because it's like nothing's happening, nothing's happening, nothing's happening, and then suddenly it's like the water faucet turns on and you're just sweating profusely. Once that core body temperature gets a certain temperature, boom, it's... so last year, yeah, looking into the easy water stuff and the connection with infrared and everything, emediapress.com, you can scroll down, you'll see Dr. Pollack's talk, Fourth Phase of Water Beyond Solid, Liquid, and Vapor, which is basically the same name as the book you see there. It's written so that basically anybody at any level can understand this book. A high school student can understand this book. Beautiful book. His son drew the comic little diagrams and all this kind of stuff to make it easy for people to understand. I'd recommend everybody get a copy of that book, Fourth Phase of Water. There's not 3 phases. Very, very interesting. There's a lot of real science behind it, and he made it super simple for anybody to understand. I just want to talk about redox signaling molecules a little bit, because red and infrared stimulates the mitochondria, which stimulates the production of ATP. Well, simultaneously, the mitochondria is also producing reactive oxygen species and reduced species. These are more positively charged, like chlorine and oxygen-based positively charged molecules and atomic species, which eliminate virus and bacteria. Your mitochondria makes ozone, hydrogen peroxide, and stuff that goes and kills germs. And it also produces these negatively charged atoms and molecules which activate antioxidants. You can't just take an antioxidant and have it automatically neutralize a free radical. They actually have to be activated by these RS molecules and atoms coming from the mitochondria that activates the antioxidant. Then the antioxidant can do its business. And so it eliminates free radicals. Here's a list of what the mitochondria creates in addition to ATP. These are about 20 or something reactive oxygen species and reduced species, molecular and atomic species. And ASEA, I'm a distributor in it, so if you buy any back there, you know, I do benefit from that. I'll just tell you, I'm not trying to hide from that. It's one of the best products I've ever seen, and it was when I read the patent that sold me, because before I found out about it, I was looking at ways to stabilize electrolyzed molecular and atomic species that are created from electrolyzing just water, and how can you maintain the separation of those without them just reforming back to water? Because normally you electrolyze saline solution, you wait, it'll form these, then it'll just revert right back to salt water. The sum total of all these is sodium chloride water. But one doctor, medical doctor, physicist, figured a way to create these in one electrolyzed solution, keep it stabilized where none of these react with each other. And people who have a background in chemistry can see that. That's actually a very profound accomplishment. So they were able to put it into a bottle to where you could actually have a product. Because before it was point of use, you'd make it with these expensive contraptions with platinum mesh electrodes and everything. You make it and you got to drink it right away. And there's a whole interesting history on that. That's its own presentation. I do have a free book, emediapress.com/redox. And that goes into the science. It's really for the layman, because Dr. Samuelson with the company wrote a book that was supposed to be the simple book for people to understand. And I don't have a strong background in biochemistry, but I can understand the book, and I'm reading through it, and I'm thinking, if this is what is being put out to teach the average person what this redox signaling business is, something's got to change. So I didn't use any of their stuff, and I wrote my own based on simple analogies and explanations of the whole redox process. And there's profound things with sports endurance, exceeding the benefits of illegal doping drugs by 500%. By taking a redox signaling supplement. The time to ventilatory threshold is greatly extended, and the time to VO2 max when you pass out and you're in anaerobic state is greatly, greatly extended. It's absolutely profound. Triathlon trainer here in Spokane shaved 55 minutes off his time, almost an hour. And you're talking about they trained for years to shave a couple minutes, an hour, and so did the people he trained that were using that kind of product. But even if you don't use that kind of product, just know that a lot of the infrared and light therapy, boosting the mitochondrial activity and boosting ATP and stuff, you are increasing the amount of redox signaling molecules in the body. ASEA, A-S-E-A. This was basically, for me, a lead generator and a promotional piece to get people involved with the company. So I'll just be straight up with that. If you buy it, you do. If you don't, you don't. But the point is that this explains in the simplest way probably anybody has read on what this is about. Skin and collagen. So red light has a little bit deeper penetration, and these fibroblasts are, and all this collagen process is like reconstructing the rebar that's kind of holding up all the structure and everything on how, you know, when this integrity starts to break down, you start to get wrinkled skin and all this kind of stuff, more dehydrated. And red light stimulating the increase in fibroblast production, ATP, collagen, it stimulates production of new capillaries and increased circulation. And so you can actually reverse, that's one of the main popular cosmetologists or aestheticians, you know, using red light therapy to basically reverse wrinkles and stuff like that, just applying red and infrared light straight to the face. And then we have blue light for acne. You got to watch out for blue light in the eyes, short wavelength. It's not good for it. But on the surface of the skin, short wavelength, bouncing off the top, can kill some of the bacteria and stuff like that, and issues relating to acne. So you can kind of see the difference between that and that. Kind of little animation there. Blue surface, red deep, right? Blue surface, red deep. Okay, so these are just random before and after pictures I saw in different things. I can't vouch for their own devices or whatever, but the point is this is just indisputably accepted as these are the type of results that can be had by applying red and infrared to the skin. Wrinkles, acne, all kinds of different problems and blemishes. This is real stuff. People's known about this for years. Here's just a few extra little examples. The science is all there for all of this. It's indisputable. Right here, PubMed, protective mechanism for visible red light in normal human dermal fibroblasts, enhancement of whatever, this is probably some type of enzyme or something, DNA repair activity. So it's acknowledging that plain old visible red light, 660 nanometer or so light can repair DNA damage from like UV. Just red light, okay? So we're talking simple stuff.
Do you get those surface benefits from the infrared sauna?
Surface benefits?
Skin benefits on your skin?
It can make it softer, and I don't know if it brings hydration to the skin or whatever, but specifically for those type of acne kind of things is the blue light. But for the wrinkles and stuff like that, yeah, if you're talking about that as far as smoothing out the skin and increasing the quality of collagen and stuff like that, then yes. Cuts, wounds, got about 20 slides, 20 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay, so cuts, wounds. I wrote this article back in 2001. Light emitting diode speed, the healing of cuts. Couple of the references was obviously McGee's book. If you type that in online, you can find it. It's kind of a short article. It was 19 years ago, 18 years ago or something. Biophotonics International, I don't know if they're around anymore. I had a hard time finding the reference to that paper, but it's talking about like those in the Navy, submariners were using red light panels and stuff to treat bruising and cuts and all this kind of stuff, and they healed twice as fast with the red light as without. It's recommended for healing cuts in space because in the controlled low gravity orbit, cuts don't really coagulate very well, but when you put red light on it, suddenly it triggers the process and the cuts start to heal at a normal rate in so-called 0G. Here's an example, this out of McGee's book. This is a horse. This is 45 days that went from this to this. That's a big gaping wound there. So 45 days is pretty quick, and that is with both red and infrared, or it's both with LED and laser used together, red and infrared lasers. This is one that is in 4 weeks. 4 weeks from this, got ripped up on a barbed wire fence or something. Went from this to this in just 4 weeks flat. That's very, very fast.
Yeah,
I would say 15 minutes, maybe twice a day. I don't know if that's exactly what they use, but I can tell you that that would probably give these exact results. Photosensitive compounds. This was a cool one. I'm not a fan of pharmaceuticals, but this is a cool concept. This is some type of salt, porphyrin sodium solution injected. And I remember the study that we saw back then was that esophageal cancer in children, so if they got the cancer cells down in the bottom of the throat, that photofrin can be injected and it accumulates in cancer cells and stuff. And you can run fiber optics with red light down the throat, and when it comes in contact with it, there's a chemical reaction that releases a positively charged oxygen atom, I believe, that turns around and kills the cancer cell. So it's very, very targeted, talking guided missile, right? Enlighten Company, Light Energy in Seattle, they had a supplement version that was along those lines, had like St. John's wort, cow parsley, some of these kind of herbs. You can take them and take them and take them, and when you start loading up, they accumulate in organs and in cancer cells. St. John's wort, most people use it for depression. Takes a long time, 90 days. You really got to kind of load up on it. But if you go out in the sun, you can get sunburn really easy. Well, if you have these photosensitive compounds accumulating in different areas of the body and you shine red light on it, then you get the same kind of effects as this photofrin kind of concept. And that's the thing almost no light therapy company out there is even really pointing a finger at. Life Force Energy Network System, real quick, this is just kind of the acupuncture meridian system. And even though they call it traditional Chinese medicine theory, other cultures also were aware of this. And theory is what is flowing through it? What is that chi? What is that life force energy moving through these meridians? But it's indisputable that those meridians actually are there, and contrary to the opinion of a lot of medical doctors, oh, it's the vagus nervous, nerve system and all this stuff. It's all nonsense. It doesn't have anything to do with nervous system. It's its own completely separate system that's been quantified for 100 years. I can't remember the name of the solution or whatever that was injected, but McGee found it, a reference. He knew this stuff inside out. He was a pit bull researcher that would just dig and dig until he found what he was looking for. But he knew what to look for. Some Russian biophysicist, medical doctor, something in the early 1900s, would inject a radioactive tracer. It sounded something like sodium pertechnetate or something like that. I couldn't find a reference to it because I didn't know how to spell it. But it was some radioactive tracer compound. So I think this is like the heart meridian down the side of the pinky right here, if that's right. Okay, so it's moving down. And so if you inject a radioactive tracer into one of the acupuncture points on that meridian and use the gamma camera to pick up the radioactive emission downstream, it follows 100% in correlation with what you see here. So that was the origin of nuclear medicine in acupuncture. Right now, you go into nuclear medicine and you search for acupuncture, man, you'll spend a lifetime just looking at all the published stuff on that. It's absolutely amazing. Fritz Popp takes a lot of credit for some things he wasn't necessarily the first to do, but he was most well known for it. He was a German biophysicist or whatever his title was, and he was kind of credited with discovering the biophotons, which is from cell-to-cell communication. They're little light impulses of light. He wasn't actually the one that he got credit for it, but there were actually people before him doing the exact same thing. One of the things he did, just like the radioactive tracers, is let's say you take light and you shine it into an acupuncture point, and you use a photomultiplier downstream, kind of like a night vision scope type of light amplifier technology, super, super sensitive. Downstream, you see that light moving on those exact pathways. And so we are literally channels. They're literally channels that will channel light. Completely quantified. It's not even questionable. Those meridians are there. They channel light. It's proven. Here's a quick, easy way. If you have like a red laser pointer or something, you don't do a whole body adjustment. Is next to each fingernail is a point that will go to all the meridians. You just brush it over, do that maybe 5 minutes on one hand, on the other. You can also do it across your toenails in the same place. And you're actually doing kind of a full body so-called acupuncture energy balancing adjustment, whatever you want to call it, just by using red and infrared laser or LED. 5 minutes one hand, 5 minutes another, and you actually just pretty much hit every meridian in the body. You can do the red and infrared with the each point on the ears. And so I'll get into just a couple minutes on DIY light therapy. It's not really that extensive that I'm going to go into because it's really pretty simple and common sense once you see it. This picture has Roger cut off at the top there. This is a cot where we had these heat lamps underneath. And I couldn't find the pictures where we had ourselves wrapped in aluminum foil, trying to create our own little heat deal, and, you know, I don't know, it's pretty fun. So save money and more effective, because what you pay for in a lot of the expensive light therapy devices, the amount of light and everything that you actually get per dollar is kind of a ripoff. This right here, so I found these. So if you go to emediapress.com/red light, that has links to Amazon, where this is a red and infrared panel. And it's actually, for a while, it was getting kind of hard to find the red infrared combo, because a lot of the panels are red and blue, because that's beneficial for growing plants. Some people in this audience might know that. Let's see. Plus, it's legal in Washington now for recreational purposes. But the red and infrared, that's $99, right? Cheap red red LED panel, maybe $30. But this is red and infrared, $99 for this much. And with the new, the newer LEDs, you get a lot of lumens per watt out of this. That right there, it's not pulsed. It plugs into the wall, 110 volts, probably getting rectified inside a little circuit, and it's got its little array of LEDs and resistors and all this. And you can use that as a panel for anything that you saw throughout this presentation for red and infrared therapeutic purposes. This is a smaller, cheaper one, $40 for, this right here, that just plugs into a regular lamp socket, put on one of these corded sockets, and you have a thing for super, super cheap. And I guarantee you that you can find products that cost hundreds to a couple $1,000s that don't even have as much as this has, okay? Medical red light is not different from plant growing red light. It's red light. How many joules per centimeter energy are you getting or whatever? I would say don't even focus on that much, because if you're just 15 minutes twice a day or something for whatever, you're going to see the benefits. So it's like you can't really make a mistake with it, and you can't hurt yourself with it. Just don't put it in your eyes. One thing I'll say real quick is, okay, we're about up, so I'll just have a couple minutes. And so, how many?
You're up. Your time's up.
Okay. One of the ladies who came to Roger's house, her mother-in-law was in her 80s. She stopped going to church because of macular degeneration, and she couldn't even really make out anybody's faces or whatever, so just kind of stayed home. Closed her eyelids, used our little X light. I think it was maybe 5 or 10 minutes through closed eyelids twice a day on the ectoderm tissue frequency. And in about 2 months, it had reversed enough she could make out pocket change. Oh, no, she could make out faces, and she was going back to church. After another 2 to 3 months, it continued to reverse to the point she could actually see pocket change from far away and know what every coin was. Cheap, right? Effective. These are an example, emediapress.com/red light. So there's links to these little cheap ones. 68 to 78 cents. I think these are intended to be like roof in your car dome lights. These are 12-volt LEDs, arrays. Here's one with a little bit bigger panels and stuff. This one down here is a 10-watt panel, 120 by 36 millimeter panel, depending on the size, 79 cents up to $99. So being that these are 12 volts, you can actually pulse them at whatever frequency with very, very simple circuits. So, I would go with just 12 volt, just kind of standardize it, make it simple. If any of you have a sideband generator, you have this frequency generator, and you have this battery with it. Well, my intention from the beginning is to have this as a universal system so that you can use this signal generator and this battery for a whole library of all kinds of stuff without having to repurchase the battery and the signal generator. And so, this is on sidebandgenerator.com or, vril.io, where it includes that kind of stuff. And so, on vril.io, over the products page, is a link to the sideband generator right there, where you can go in and you can kind of see, the sideband generated on this frequency spectrum analyzer, or what the waveform on a scope looks like as it's running. So you don't have to repurchase those things. You'd already have it if you have that, or if you wanted to get one of those kits. There's a handful of them left. This is an ultra simple circuit. Probably the electrical engineers will look at this and laugh, thinking, well, that's obviously not the optimum way to do it. But just with a handful of components, you plug the 12-volt battery in here, so you got the plus coming around here through an LED, through whatever resistor you calculate for whatever the current rating on the LED is, going through a MOSFET back to ground. And so if you don't know electronics, this is nothing more than a water faucet. You know, stuff flows through when you turn the faucet on here. And when there's no energy here, then the water faucet is off and it can't flow. So if you have a signal generator, just like the one you saw, you got the positive output of the signal generator coming through here, turning on the water faucet at whatever frequency you want to close the loop for the electricity to flow through the LEDs and pulse at whatever frequency you want. There's also all kinds of different little LED driver circuits. There's ways to program it, so you don't even need that signal generator. You can program it right into a chip, turn it on. It's pulsing exactly what waveform and what frequency you want. So, you know, any electrical engineer in here would see that this is beyond a simplified remedy, which you wouldn't want this exact circuit in a product that you're selling. But if you're experimenting, I made some 3D printed sunglasses, put holes in them, put red infrared LEDs in them, pulsed it at 292 times a second for my dad's cataracts. Reversed it a little bit, but he's going to probably need surgery. For my mom, she has the beginning stages of it. Most of it has already reversed, and her image maintains sharper, and she doesn't need her glasses on for a longer period of time by closing her eyes, putting on a 3D goggles with the infrared, pulsing at 292 times a second. So, you know, obviously I use this stuff in my own life. I don't just talk about it and want to promote these ideas. It's been a part of my life, and so anybody doing MWO stuff or Rife stuff or whatever it happens to be, combine the red and infrared, because there's things that this gives benefits for that you're not going to easily get directly from the other modalities. Like I said, at some point I'll make some of these type of devices that you can just plug right into the battery and the signal generator and stuff, and you know, whenever there's time and, you know, all the free time to be able to do that. And so that's the end, and hope you got something out of that. So just maybe do a couple minutes for, I don't know, does anybody have any questions? Just a couple. If you can come over to this microphone here. And we can't go too long, so if you can keep your questions brief, we'll just take a couple, and then, oh, let's see, Ken Roshan, is that you, Jeff? Yeah, if you could let Ken know, he'll be up pretty soon. Okay. We'll just take a few minutes, a couple questions. Ken, then we'll get started.
Yeah, you mentioned a quenching pad.
Yeah, come up closer to the mic.
You mentioned a quenching pad for
Quenching
saunas.
Yeah.
Quenching pad for saunas. No, in my sauna I had a book. There's a book in my sauna with the title Quench. Yeah.
Any information on like neuropathy, degenerative brain disorders, anything that maybe the infrared or red light?
Yeah, so our friend Mary Mary E. in Spokane, she had like blood sugar levels like up to the 800s, and she was kind of a miracle. She was even able to move around. The diabetes was so bad, and she had diabetic neuropathy all through her feet, the whole 9 yards, blood pressure problems. Roger called her Basket Case Mary, you know, because every problem under the sun, you know, she was fine with that nickname, you know, they were good buddies. And she used all this stuff, and it pretty much all reversed and went away, normalized blood sugar levels, a lot of the nerve problems disappeared, and it was all from doing the modalities with the light, the sauna, and so forth. So, yeah. Okay, that it? Okay.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
It's Maddie. What if you were to put the hemorrhoid probe in your mouth, not after it had been in your rectum, but like to help your thyroid and this part of your body?
They are washable.
Yeah.
Rogers included these little rubberized, like finger cock kind of things that went over it, but you're heating up a plastic that you don't want in contact with the body, and it's reducing some of the heat. People just wash them, antibacterial soap, you know, whatever. Turning on low temperature, it's been used in the ears, nose for allergies and stuff like that, but also in the mouth to kind of create, but you don't want to crank it all the way up to 113 degrees. So for example, yeah, so that has been used for that in every orifice of the body.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, that's it. We'll take a quick couple-minute break, and we'll get started with Ken right away.